Alright guys, we're going to talk about the chainsaw a little bit here. So I just use a very simple blackmax chainsaw. They're a cheap Walmart brand chainsaw. I use an 18-inch blade on it, but they come with 16 or 18-inch blades, but the saw is exactly the same. And they charge you an extra $40 or something at Walmart if you buy it with an 18-inch blade already on it. I would just go with the 16, and you can buy an 18-inch blade and put it on it yourself. Whenever you're putting gas in the chainsaw, you're going to want to... Chainsaws use mixed gas. You can use just regular gasoline. I like to use specifically the brand that the saw is, and blackmax makes their own. It's also the cheapest one that they have on the shelf there. So basically, one of these little cans mixes with 1 gallon of gas. You can buy larger cans of this stuff, and you can keep one of these and just dump it in a gallon of gas. If you get yourself a gallon gas tank like this, you dump one whole thing in there, shake it up, and then that's how you mix the gas for the chainsaw. It's pretty simple. This one's the gas, this one's the oil. It says 50-to-1 mix right on the cap. Now, it's not like car oil. You're using bar and chain oil. And the oil, if you're not familiar with chainsaws, actually lubricates the chainsaw blade when you're sawing. If it gets low on it, it'll start to smoke and get a little hotter, and it tends to dull in the blade a lot faster. So that's a couple basic things to know there on the chainsaw. It's easy to mix up the fuel and the oil, so don't do that. Make sure you're putting the gas or the oil in the right tank. The next thing that you're going to want to know here is installing a blade on the chainsaw. It's pretty straightforward. There's 2 bolts right here. All you do is take those off, and you can pull this side of the saw off. This whole plastic part will come right off here. I'm going to take it off here. There is a tensioner thing. I don't know what you'd call it exactly, but right here there's a tensioner for once you get the blade on there and the chain on there. Alright, so pulling this off here, show you guys just basically how you do it here. I'm just going to pull them bolts off here. The saw was getting a little hot earlier, so I haven't been using it right now. I'm not going to show you guys how to clean the carburetor on this video, but I have done that before one time. And basically, it wasn't actually the carburetor that was the issue at that time. I had water in the gas. Okay. So I took the outside piece off. You can see the chain gets a lot looser. You've got this. Basically, if you're putting one together and you have the chainsaw, the actual part that spins here, You put the blade on first, then you run the chain around it. Now you're going to want to make sure the teeth are facing that way on the saw. You don't want to put this thing on backwards where that's not the case. So make sure that your chain's on the right direction. It's a common mistake. I've done it once and I never did it again, but you want these little notches that you sharpen, this side here, to be facing that way on the blade. You don't want it the other way. Basically, you slide this thing on, it comes off, and then you put the chain around it. And once you do that, I'm going to show you guys here, it's pretty straightforward here. Okay, so I've got the chain on there, I've tightened it up a little bit. You put this back on here. Now, the tensioner right here, you're going to have to mess with a little bit when you put this back on, probably. And this is actually good because the chain was getting a little loose. Sometimes they tend to loosen up a little bit as you go. I'm just going to make sure, well, I'll explain that too. The tensioner actually fits in this hole right here on the blade. So you have to adjust it to make sure that that lines up, the tensioner on the saw, when you're putting it on here like this. So I'm going to adjust that real quick here and make sure that it locks in here. Okay, I've got it locked in here. When it's locked in, your bolts will stick out far enough that you can just put this back on here. Your chainsaw will come with a tool like this for removing and taking these bolts on here. It's also got a screwdriver end on the, see, it's also got a screwdriver end for the tensioner. Now, this chain's still pretty loose here. You want to just tighten these bolts just a little bit here, not where they're snug. And alright guys, so anyway, the video shut off there, it ran out of battery. So anyway, you're going to want to get this chain tightened. You'll turn this thing right here till you get it to where it's, you don't want it super tight, you kind of just want it where it, just a little bit, you can kind of pull it and it springs back. You want it to be about to where it gets some tension right about there. Give it just a little more crank here, that's probably good. Then you tighten the bolts fully once you get that set up there. This thing's a lock for the chainsaw, brake on it. When you're some people like to start them with that. I usually just do it without it. I don't really like that thing, but you know, if you want to be safe, that's a good thing to use. This is the choke on the chainsaw. When you're starting it, first pulling it, you might want to use the choke. And once you hear it start to kind of really almost turn on, you'll kind of want to turn that choke off when you're starting it. This is a fuel bubble that puts pressure in the fuel tank. If it seems like the gas isn't getting to the engine, you're going to want to press that button once or twice just to make sure there's a little bit of pressure in there to push the fuel into the engine. So those are just some basic chainsaw things to know. I figured it'd be good to put on my channel, being I'm going to talk a little bit about how to fell a tree. Yeah, alright, I'll get back to the video. Well guys, talking about saws here, I figured I'd just throw in a handsaw. Personally, I do like to use the handsaw sometimes. There's pros and cons to handsaws and chainsaws, and obviously the chainsaw saws things faster. It can be more efficient as far as speed goes, but once in a while you have some trouble starting it, and you know it can take 200 pulls. Sometimes you have to sharpen the chain. There's a lot of maintenance involved. You got to buy gas for it. I think if you really want to be off the grid, you should have the same manual hand tool opposite of what you're using. I actually built all my chicken coops and outbuildings and stuff using the handsaw. You can use a handsaw. It just takes about 4 times as long, and your arm gets a little bit more tired. But one thing about the handsaw that's a positive is you don't have to start it. There's no maintenance required on it, and you can do stuff like that, and it ain't gonna break. I couldn't do that with the chainsaw. If I dropped the chainsaw, it could potentially have issues, knock something loose inside of it. So if you are building stuff and you're using a chainsaw, you know, just consider the pros and the cons. And I think, you know, you can go off grid and use a handsaw if you really need to. I do a lot of business with the Amish and talk with the Amish, and they use mostly handsaws for building buildings and stuff. And I would do that, but I already have the chainsaw, so I'm like, I might as well use it. And that chainsaw was $98, so it's not particularly expensive. I think they're $168 now at Walmart. Actually, I checked the other day, so that's an accurate number there. But I recommend having one of both. If you're going to do a lot of logging, the chainsaw is a good option. But if you don't have the funds and you kind of want to do it a little more frugally, I'm all for someone going out there with an axe and a saw. Obviously, this is not a saw for cutting a tree. There's a different type of saw for that, but just figured I'd throw that in. Sit. Sit. Come on, sit. Oh, good boy. Good boy. Lay down. Lay down. All right. Good boy. Hey, guys, let's make Bailey famous. Let's make Bailey famous. Like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Mustache Off Grid. Hope y'all have a wonderful day, and God bless. Let's make Bailey famous, guys.